The transport ship shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Crix Nakia, once a respected member of the Galactic Council, now reduced to a common criminal, peered out the viewport with trepidation. The swirling blue and white orb below seemed deceptively peaceful, but he knew better. This was Earth, the infamous death world that had become the galaxy's most secure prison. Prisoners, prepare for landing. A gruff voice crackled over the intercom. Welcome to your new home. He exchanged glances with his fellow inmates, a motley crew of aliens from various species, all convicted of crimes deemed too severe for rehabilitation on their home planets. The air was thick with fear and resignation as they descended through the cloud cover. The true nature of their prison revealed itself. Sprawling cities of steel and glass, vast oceans teeming with life, and lush green forests that seemed to stretch endlessly. It was beautiful, yes, but also terrifying. This world, they'd been told, was a crucible of evolution where only the strongest survived. The ship touched down with a bone-jarring thud, and the doors hissed open. A wave of hot, humid air assaulted them, carrying with it a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds and smells. Nakia stumbled out onto the landing pad, his legs weak from the higher gravity. A group of humans stood waiting for them, their faces impassive. They were shorter than he'd expected, with less impressive musculature than the stories had led him to believe, but their eyes held a hardness that sent a shiver down his spine. "Welcome to Earth, gentlemen," one of the humans said, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
"I'm Wen Johnson.
"And this is your new home. You're here because you screwed up, and now you're going to learn what it means to survive on a real planet." Nakia wanted to protest, to explain that his crime was a mere misunderstanding, but the words died in his throat. The warden's gaze swept over them, cold and calculating. "You think you're tough?" he continued. "You ain't seen nothing yet. Earth will break you, remake you, or kill you. Your choice." As if on cue, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Nakia flinched, remembering the tales of Earth's violent weather patterns. "First things first," Warden Johnson barked. "You'll be assigned to work details. You'll learn to farm, to build, to survive in this world. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn something about yourselves in the process." They were herded into a processing center where human guards efficiently cataloged them and assigned them to various sectors. Nakia found himself grouped with a surly Honan and a nervous Floian, both of whom looked as out of place as he felt. Their first task was simple: clear a field for planting, under the watchful eyes of their human overseers. They were given primitive tools and set to work. The sun beat down mercilessly, its rays feeling like plasma bolts against his sensitive skin. As he struggled to uproot a particularly stubborn weed, he heard a chuckle behind him. A human guard stood there, shaking his head. "You're doing it all wrong, alien," he said, not unkindly. "Here, let me show you." To Nakia's surprise, he took the tool from his hands and demonstrated the proper technique. His movements were fluid, efficient, born of a lifetime adapting to this harsh world. "There," he said, handing the tool back. "Now you try." Nakia mimicked his actions, and to his amazement, the weed came free easily. The guard nodded approvingly. "You'll get the hang of it," he said. "Just remember, on Earth, it's adapt or die." As the day wore on, Nakia began to understand why Earth was considered a death world. The constant struggle against gravity, the unpredictable weather, the sheer variety of life forms, some benign, others deadly, all conspired to make every moment a test of survival. But he also began to see something else. The humans, for all their apparent frailty, moved through this world with an ease that bordered on supernatural. They laughed in the face of danger, shrugged off injuries that would have crippled beings from gentler worlds, and approached each new challenge with a determination that was both inspiring and terrifying. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Nakia collapsed onto the ground, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. The human guard from earlier approached, offering a container of water. Not bad for your first day, he said as Nakia gratefully accepted the drink. You might just make it here after all. Nakia looked up at him, confusion evident in his expression. Why? He asked. Why help us? We're criminals, outcasts. The guard's face softened slightly. Because that's what humans do, he replied. We help each other survive. And now, like it or not, you're part of our world. So drink up, rest, and be ready for tomorrow because on Earth, there's always another challenge waiting. As he sipped the water, watching the alien sun sink below the horizon, Nakia realized that his re-education had already begun. Earth wasn't just a prison, it was a forge, tempering them in its fires. And somehow, against all odds, he found himself looking forward to what the next day might bring. Welcome to Earth, indeed. The first week on Earth passed in a blur of backbreaking labor, sore muscles, and harsh lessons. Each day brought new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities to fail spectacularly. But with each failure came a chance to learn, to adapt, to become something more than what they were. It was during their second week that Nakia truly began to appreciate the resilience of humanity. They were assigned to help construct a new wing of the prison complex, working alongside human laborers. The work was grueling, made worse by the constant threat of Earth's unpredictable weather. As they toiled under the scorching sun, Nakia couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly the humans moved, how they seemed to draw strength from the very world that sought to crush them. They laughed and joked as they worked, their camaraderie a stark contrast to the weary distrust that still lingered among the alien prisoners. One day, as they were laying the foundation for a new building, the sky suddenly darkened. A massive storm system rolled in, bringing with it howling winds and torrential rain. Lightning crackled across the sky, each bolt feeling like it was aimed directly at them. "Everyone, take cover!" shouted Foreman Richards, a burly human with arms like tree trunks. "Move it, you sorry sacks of—" They scrambled for shelter, their alien physiologies ill-equipped to handle the sudden onslaught. As Nakia huddled beneath a hastily erected tarp, he watched in awe as the human workers continued to secure the site, seemingly unfazed by the elemental fury around them. Suddenly, a cry of pain cut through the storm's roar. One of the Floian, Glicks, had been struck by a falling piece of equipment. Without hesitation, two human workers rushed to his aid, lifting the heavy metal off him and dragging him to safety. "Medic!" Foreman Richards bellowed, his voice somehow carrying over the wind. "We've got a man down." Nakia was stunned. These humans, who had every reason to despise them, were risking their lives to save one of their own. It was a level of compassion he hadn't expected, especially not on this brutal world. As the storm raged on, Nakia found himself working alongside a human named Mike to reinforce their shelter. His movements were sure and steady, a sharp contrast to Nakia's own clumsy attempts. "You're thinking too much," Mike said, noticing Nakia's frustration. "Earth doesn't give a damn about your plans or your hesitation. You gotta feel it, react to it." "How?" Nakia asked, genuinely curious. "How do you make it look so easy?" Mike grinned, rainwater streaming down his face. "Practice, my alien friend. Lots and lots of practice. And a healthy dose of let's do this." As the storm finally began to subside, Nakia realized something had changed. The fear that had been his constant companion since arriving on Earth had diminished, replaced by a grudging respect for this world and its inhabitants. The following days brought more work, more challenges, but also more interactions with their human overseers. To his surprise, many of them seemed genuinely interested in teaching them, not just supervising their labor. One evening, as they sat around a fire, another uniquely human invention that both fascinated and terrified him, Warden Johnson paid them a visit. His hard eyes scanned their group, lingering on each alien face. "You've all made it through your first month," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "That's something. But don't get cocky. Earth's got plenty more lessons to teach you." A Honin named Krax, emboldened by their recent progress, spoke up. "Why bother teaching us at all? Why not just let this world kill us and be done with it? The warden's laugh was as harsh as a sandstorm. Because that's not the human way, you scaly bastard. We don't just survive here, we thrive. And if you sorry lot can learn to do the same, well, maybe there's hope for the galaxy after all. As Warden Johnson walked away, Nakia found himself pondering his words. The human strength wasn't just in their physical adaptations to this world, but in their unbreakable spirit, their ability to face adversity with a grin and a raised middle finger. That night, as he lay on his bunk, listening to the sounds of Earth's nocturnal life, Nakia made a decision. He would embrace this world, with all its dangers and wonders. He would learn from the humans, adapt as they had adapted, and perhaps, in doing so, become something greater than he had ever been before. Earth was a crucible, yes, but from its fires, the aliens were being forged into something new, something stronger, something, dare he say it, almost human. And as he drifted off to sleep, he found himself looking forward to what new challenges tomorrow might bring. Because on Earth, every day was an opportunity to prove yourself, to grow, to become more than you were. Humanity, yeah, indeed. As months passed, their alien group began to adapt to life on Earth. The backbreaking labor that once left them exhausted now felt almost routine. They learned to read the signs of approaching storms, to work with the planet's rhythms rather than against them. But Earth, true to form, wasn't about to let them get too comfortable. It was during a routine maintenance run to one of the outer agricultural sectors that everything changed. Their team, Nakia himself, Krax the Honin, a silent Vulcan named THXS, and their human supervisor, Jack, were tasked with repairing an irrigation system damaged in a recent earthquake. As they approached the site, an uneasy feeling settled in Nakia's gut. The air felt charged, heavy with an unfamiliar scent that set his nerves on edge. Jack noticed it too, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "Something's not right," he muttered, reaching for his communicator. "This is Team Alpha. We're picking up some strange." His words were cut off by a series of bone-chilling howls that seemed to come from all directions. From the shadows of the nearby forest, a pack of massive, snarling wolves emerged, all teeth, muscle, and primal fury. Jack breathed. "Those are dire wolves. I thought they were extinct." Nakia stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These creatures were far larger and more terrifying than any canine he'd encountered before. "Move!" Jack shouted, snapping them out of their stupor. "Back to the transport now!" They bolted, their legs pumping furiously as the pack gave chase. Nakia could hear their thunderous paws behind them, feel their hot breath on his neck. This was it, he thought. This is how I would die on this unforgiving planet. But then something unexpected happened. Jack, instead of continuing toward the relative safety of their vehicle, suddenly stopped and turned to face the charging wolves. "What are you doing?" Nakia screamed, certain he was about to witness the human's gruesome demise. Jack didn't respond. Instead, he planted his feet firmly on the ground, raised his arms, and let out a roar that rivaled the wolves in its ferocity. The pack, caught off guard by this display of defiance, actually hesitated. In that moment of confusion, Jack pulled out a small device from his belt. A sonic emitter, Nakia later learned, and activated it. The air filled with a high-pitched whine that made his head throb. The wolves reared back, shaking their massive heads in distress. "Now's our chance," Jack yelled. "Move your asses." They didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted for the transport, piling in as Jack kept the creatures at bay with the sonic device. As soon as he was inside, they took off, leaving the bewildered pack in their dust. As they sped back toward the main compound, his heart still racing, Nakia turned to Jack in awe. How did you know what to do?" He grinned, the adrenaline of their near-death experience still evident in his eyes. "I didn't," he admitted. "But on Earth, you learn to think on your feet. Sometimes you just gotta stand your ground and hope for the best." Back at the compound, their story spread like wildfire. The other prisoners looked at them with a mixture of fear and respect, while the human staff seemed almost proud. That night, as they gathered for their evening meal, Warden Johnson made an unexpected appearance. His gaze swept over their group, lingering on those of them who had faced the wolves. "Today," he began, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "you got a taste of what it truly means to live on Earth. It's not just about the work, the weather, or the gravity. It's about facing the unknown, adapting on the fly, and having the guts to stand up to whatever this world throws at you." He paused, his eyes meeting Nikia's for a moment before moving on. "You aliens came here as criminals, outcasts, but today you proved that you're learning. You're adapting. You're becoming, well, if not human, then something close to it." A murmur ran through the crowd at his words. Was this grudging respect from the notoriously hard-nosed warden? "Don't get me wrong," Johnson continued, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You've still got a long way to go. But today you took a step in the right direction. Remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to face death and come out the other side. Because that, ladies and gentlemen, is what it means to survive on Earth." As Warden Johnson walked away, Nikia felt something shift inside him. The fear and resentment that had been his constant companions since arriving on Earth began to fade, replaced by something new, something that felt suspiciously like pride. He looked around at his fellow prisoners, aliens from across the galaxy, brought together by circumstance and forged in the crucible of Earth. They were changing, becoming something more than they had been. And for the first time since his arrival, Nikia felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Earth was still a death world, yes, but it was also a world of infinite possibilities, of untapped potential, and they, its unwilling students, were learning to tap into that potential one grueling day at a time. As he lay in his bunk that night, the memory of the day's events replaying in his mind, Nikia found himself whispering a phrase he'd heard the humans use countless times before. Humanity. Yeah. And for the first time, he truly understood what it meant. The encounter with the dire wolves marked a turning point in their rehabilitation. No longer were they simply going through the motions, counting down the days until their sentences were complete. Now, they approached each day with a newfound determination, a hunger to prove themselves worthy of this unforgiving world. Weeks passed, and their alien group began to gel into a cohesive unit. Krax, the Honin, became their unofficial leader, his strategic mind proving invaluable in tackling the daily challenges Earth threw their way. THXS, the silent Vulcan, turned out to be a mechanical genius, able to jury-rig solutions to problems that would have stumped even the most seasoned human engineers. As for Nikia, he found himself drawn more and more to the humans, fascinated by their resilience and adaptability. He spent his free time poring over Earth's history, marveling at how this species had not only survived but thrived on a planet that seemed determined to wipe them out at every turn. It was during one of these study sessions that Warden Johnson found him, hunched over a datapad in the prison library. "Enjoying your reading, Crix Nikia?" he asked, his gruff voice startling him out of his concentration. Nikia looked up, surprised to see him there. "Yes, sir," he replied. "I was just reading about something called the Age of Exploration. It's incredible." Johnson nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Ah yes, when we humans decided that one death world wasn't enough, so we set out to conquer the seas." "But why?" Nikia couldn't help but ask. "Why take such risks when you had already carved out a place for yourselves on land?" The warden chuckled, pulling up a chair beside him. "That, my alien friend, is the essence of humanity. We're never satisfied with good enough. We always push further, reach higher, dive deeper. It's what's allowed us to not just survive on this planet, but to bend it to our will." Nikia pondered his words, thinking back to his own species' cautious, measured approach to progress. How different might their civilization be if they had embraced that human drive to explore, to push boundaries? His musings were interrupted by the blaring of alarms. Johnson was on his feet in an instant, his hand going to the communicator at his belt. "Report!" he barked. A frantic voice crackled through the speaker. "Sir, We've got a situation at the eastern perimeter. The recent tremors have destabilized the ground. We've got sinkholes opening up, and they're getting bigger by the minute. If we don't do something fast, we're going to lose the entire East Wing. Johnson's face hardened. I'm on my way. Mobilize all available personnel for evacuation and containment. As the warden turned to leave, Nakia found himself speaking up. Sir, let us help. My team, we can assist with the evacuation. Johnson paused, studying him for a long moment. Then, to Nakia's surprise, he nodded. All right, Crix Nakia, gather your team and report to the East Wing. But remember this isn't a game. One wrong move, and you could get yourself or someone else killed. Understood. Understood, sir, Nakia replied, already moving to action. The scene at the eastern perimeter was chaos incarnate. The ground itself seemed alive, writhing and buckling as massive sinkholes opened up, swallowing everything in their path. Human guards were frantically coordinating the evacuation, their voices barely audible over the groaning of stressed metal and the panicked cries of prisoners. His team and Nakia threw themselves into the fray without hesitation. Krax's tactical mind proved invaluable, quickly organizing their efforts to maximize efficiency. HXS's strength and agility allowed him to reach prisoners trapped in precarious positions, and Nakia found himself working alongside the human guards, his newfound knowledge of Earth's geology helping to predict where the next sinkhole might appear. Hours passed in a blur of sweat, dust, and adrenaline. They worked tirelessly, pulling people from the brink of disaster, shoring up failing structures, and battling against a planet that seemed determined to reclaim what they had built upon it. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the devastated landscape, they finally managed to stabilize the situation. The last of the prisoners had been evacuated, and emergency force fields were in place to prevent further collapse. Exhausted, covered in dirt and grime, Nakia found himself standing at the edge of the largest sinkhole, staring into its depths. A hand on his shoulder startled him, and he turned to find Warden Johnson standing beside him. Hell of a day. Hey, Crix Nakia? He said, his voice tinged with both weariness and respect. Nakia nodded, unable to find the words to express the tumult of emotions coursing through him. You and your team did good out there, Johnson continued. Saved a lot of lives today, human and alien alike. We just did what needed to be done, Nakia replied, echoing a phrase he'd heard humans use countless times. Johnson chuckled. Now you're starting to sound like one of us. His expression grew serious. You know, when we started this program, using Earth as a rehabilitation center for alien criminals, a lot of people thought we were crazy. Said it was too dangerous. That we'd just be sentencing you all to death. He paused, gazing out over the ravaged landscape. But days like today, they prove that we were right. That even the worst of you can find something here. Something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. As he stood there, side by side with this human who had once been his jailer and was now something closer to a mentor, Nakia felt a profound shift within himself. The fear and resentment that had driven him for so long were gone, replaced by a burning desire to prove himself worthy of this world and its people. Earth was still a death world, yes, but it was their death world now, and they would face whatever it threw at them together. Humanity, yeah? Nakia whispered, the phrase no longer feeling foreign on his tongue. Johnson grinned, clapping him on the back. Couldn't have said it better myself, alien. Now come on, we've got a prison to rebuild. As they turned away from the sinkhole, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Nakia realized that his rehabilitation was complete. Earth had broken him down, yes, but it had also remade him into something stronger, something better. And for the first time since his arrival on this brutal, beautiful world, he felt truly alive.